Rory Gallagher.
I can't say enough good about Rory. You know, he's just the most amazing musician.
As a 14-year-old stood in his audience, you just thought, this guy's got it switched up to 10. Just looked like hip as anything.
His playing was so ferocious at times and could move you through the heights of ecstasy.
It always struck me as weird that this kid who came out of a show band could truly play the blues. Exceptional, you know, just exceptional.
It was hard to understand, you know, that he was so solitary. You know, there was a depression there was a melancholy.
To stretch out your hand to help Rory, I mean, it was very difficult.
We knew him, but we didn't know him. He was just a music man. That was his life.
He was naturally shy until that moment when he got up on stage.
One of the main reasons that I do what I do is because of Rory. Seeing that magic that he had in his fingers.
There's so many musicians who played music because of Rory. They picked up the guitar because of Rory.
His music lives on. I suppose for him, that's all he cared about.
He's unique. There's no other Rory Gallagher, and never will be.
Yeah, there's so many boxes because you imagine travelling all those years. I don't know how many addresses I've had. All this stuff was storage units because I had a skipitis, should we call it, and just kept whatever I could. And then obviously my mother had stuff. So it was quite a collection. It could go on forever. And, oh God. This is one of Rory and I, that was taken in Derry's as small kids. That's with our mother. Rory's a bit glum because I got to wear the cowboy suit that she made. She was a brilliant seamstress. My mother's from Cork, and my father then, on the other hand, was from Derry City in the north and joined the Free State Army in the late 30s. And my mother and father were married in 47. He was seconded by the army to go up to the new project on the Arran scheme, the dam at Kathleen Falls in Ballyshannon. So he and his young bride went up there, and Rory was born in Ballyshannon as a result. Jokingly, I always say that my father was great because he's involved in building a dam to bring electricity to Ireland, so Rory, his son, could power his electric guitar and his amplifier. My father was a musician who had his old Cayley Dance Orchestra. He was an excellent piano accordion player. I guess the gene that bypassed me had gone to the brother earlier.
Now when I was a cowboy out on the western plain, when I was a cowboy out on the western plain, well, I made $500,000 working hard on the bright rain. Come a cock, jiggy, come a cock, jiggy, jiggy, jay.
This guy was born in the Rock Hospital in Ballyshannon. Is that what they call it?
I believe so, yeah. I don't remember it myself, but I believe the hospital is still there as far as I know, but they didn't put the plaque up yet, you know. So.
Any day now.
So when I was then expected, my mother had had quite a bad experience in the hospital with the birth of Rory, so I was brought into Derry to be born at home. She had a home birth at my grandmother's in the Bogside. I was born in 31 Orchard Row, which is now long gone. And Rory and I played up and down the street. There's music everywhere in Derry. My father, he knew somebody who had a guitar who brought it down to the house and played for Rory, and Rory's eyes are like saucers. But musically, this was such an important time in Rory's life. Rock and roll was coming in. The American Navy were given the port down here, and that was their base through the Second World War. And they set up a big antenna, and they were blasting out the AFN Forces Station.
It's time to open AFN's Germany Notebook.
Information, news, music and sports. A daily service of AFN.
So we had a signal, a very strong signal, from AFN, which is the American Forces Network, which was based in Frankfurt, a huge transmitter there, blasting out all over Europe. There were loads of R&B, blues singers, as much as sort of rock and roll singers. Rory would have been exposed to all that if he was listening to the radio, and everybody listened to the radio.
You couldn't turn on a radio, but it tuned in automatically.
It was blasted out everywhere, yeah.
And you'd get this is the voice of America.
Yes, right, yeah. And of course, what you wanted was rock and roll.
You know, when I was 16, 17, I wanted to rebel against everything. You know, there's the soundtrack. The soundtrack's there.
So when did you arrive in Cork?
Mid-50s. My mother wanted to come back to Cork because we were living in the Bogside in Derry, and my father couldn't get work, but she felt there was a better life in Cork for us. And eventually we settled McCurtain Street. My grandmother had her own barn, number 27. My father never would go back to Cork for some reason, so it never reconciled after that, unfortunately. So Rory and I were always hopeful, you know, because we knew how much they loved each other on one hand, but the circumstances post-war weren't kind to them, put it that way.
At the age of 9, I got a wooden guitar. And at one stage I wanted to be a footballer and a cowboy like any other kid. But really, I mean, since the age of 6, I wanted to be a musician.
Since the earliest days, Rory was going to be a musician, end of story. The brother that I used to come home from school with and go off playing football, suddenly with the guitar would say, no, I'm not playing football today. I've got to rehearse and I've got to practice.
A lot of musicians will go to Crowley's on the Quay. I remember it well. And was it in this shop here that Rory bought the Strat?
Yeah. I remember Rory coming in one day after school and said, oh, you're not going to believe what's landed in Cork. And he said, Buddy Holly's guitar. And we stood for 2 hours just staring at the Stratocaster with the price tag of £100, which was, in today's world, you could say 10,000, 100,000.
Beyond your mother's means, anyway.
Completely beyond.
But if only she realised then it was probably the greatest investment ever made in Cork was Rory Gallagher's Fender Strat.
Absolutely, yeah.
At £100. I mean, it was a sniff, really.
I first left Ireland sort of in a show band to do the Irish circuit in England at the age of 15, I think. And then came back here and worked in the show band.
He answered an ad in the paper, and they were a semi-professional show band from West Cork called the Fontana.
You just spotted straight away. Do you know what I mean? He was unbelievable, like. Mostly blues he wanted, really. He wasn't really into showband stuff. He didn't like it, you know what I mean? But still and all, it was kind of a start to him, you know? Because he was young, like.
He wanted them to become a group, so he then got them to change the name to Impact and then take a far more beat look.
We were playing in the Arcadia, up on the stage, and when we finished, Leslie says, I have to bar you out of the Ark. He says, for about 3 months, he says, the Legion of Mary is outside the door with placards. He says, they'll have the bishop down on top of me. So he says, what's wrong, like? You're corrupting all the young ones in here by your actions on stage.
That eventually finished for me because I just wasn't happy there. So I went to Germany then. That was the mid-60s. You know, played the clubs there for a while. Formed the first Taste in 66 because at that stage the group scene had bubbled up enough. You know, you could actually point out good musicians, and I got 2 good musicians from a group from Cork called the Axles.
Well, that lineup was Eric Kittringham on bass and Norman Damery, 2 lads from Cork. They wanted Rory to join their band, the Axles, but Rory said no. So he pinched the drummer and bass player and he formed his own band, Taste.
Taste were a real breath of fresh air in Irish music. Very, very different from what a lot of Irish musicians had been capable of.
It's really hard to get a grasp on nowadays is how vital and how important they were as a band in people's lives. Rory had this ability to engage every single member of the audience from the minute he stepped on the stage. I always felt that I was drained by the end of the set because you were just totally immersed in what was going on, you know.
My goodness, to think that's all that's left of what was one of the most famous music places in Ireland, the Maritime Hotel. Taste first played here in 1967, and Eddie Kennedy, the owner, saw the band and was smitten and immediately gave them a residency.
When Rory and the 2 lads come on, it was like a whirlwind. Nobody in Belfast has seen that. At one stage, Rory just got the guitar, gave it to the drummer, Norman, and he jumped in the drums and started playing the drums. And they played the place apart. And that was my introduction to Mr. Rory Gallagher.
I suppose the main break was the Marquee Club in England. It sort of it was a residency. It was a big break for anyone at the time because you could build up every Tuesday night a crowd, and of course it was a place where various agents and so on would be there, and promoters from clubs all over the place. So it's the real break, I think.
The Marquee Club. It was a little dive, really. He used to go down some steps. It was pretty small, but had a great atmosphere. And we used to watch Rory. The atmosphere which he could conjure up was magical. And the sound, I was just completely entranced with the sound.
This was the original Marquee Club. You'd have a queue of kids all the way up the street. I mean, I noticed they have a plaque to Keith Moon, but Jimi Hendrix, this is where he broke ground. Taste's first gig at the Marquee was 1967, and they were put on a bill with a band called Robert Hurst and the Big Taste. So there was a complete dispute over the use of the name. Taste manager at the time, Eddie Kennedy, said, oh, it doesn't matter what name's on the bill. So they actually ended up being called the Erection, which Rory was furious about. I mean, I tried to square it with my mother saying, oh, it was to do with Irish building and construction, but they did very well, and they got rebooked, and they became Taste. The record companies had been in and out, shown interest, but nothing was biting. And then one of the companies, Polydor, they had a listen, and allegedly they said Rory needed a new drummer and bass player to record with at least.
At that stage, I mean, John Wilson and Richie McCracken were in a band called Cheese, who were like the supergroup in Belfast at the time, you know. So Eddie Kennedy also managed them, and he was managing Taste. So he put the 2 lads together, and sadly, Norman and Eric had to go, you know. the first time I saw that Mark II lineup, I thought, wow, I was knocked out.
Taste, we were at the cusp of something which was happening at the time, which was the power trio. So you had Jimi Hendrix, three guys, you had Cream. And so seeing a band from Ireland delivering two extraordinary albums was a big moment for rock and roll in Ireland.
What to do, what to think, what to ask permission when you feel you want to blink. Rise up, left and then look right and not look straight ahead. Just to go on, very worries.
There's a great thing on the boards. You know, I bought the On the Boards album having seen him at the Marquee. He's playing away and it's quite nice and sort of boogie kind of sound, rhythm sound. And he just stops and you can hear him turn it up and it goes, and you hear that distortion kick in and he goes, and it sings. That's what I wanted. I always thought, that's the sound I want. So I asked him, how do you get the guitar to sing like that? He said, oh, you know, I have this AC30 amp, which I really love, you know, doesn't sound like any other amp. Then I have this little box here, which drives the amp really hard, little treble booster, and that's the sound. That's it. That was his voice, his sound. So I was completely inspired. So it was Rory that gave me my sound, and that's the sound I still had.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Taste!
Taste. They were making waves, I mean, big time. I mean, they'd just gone to America with the Blind Faith tour. They did that, you know, they were becoming really big in Germany and Scandinavia, France, you know, so there's a good foothold there, you know.
What's going on?
I saw Rory at the Isle of Wight Festival in 1970. Without question, in that whole monstrous bill of 3 days, they stand out still in memory, and at the time I was completely blown away. And I saw Hendrix, you know, later, and I mean, this sounds like heresy probably. I'll take Rory on that day, you know, exceptional, you know, just exceptional.
Whatever had gone on the tour, I think was the vibe between Rory and the manager. Rory was trying to get the other two musicians to stay with him and seek new management. They sided with the manager, so the band split up. And they decided to do it the day they were on the Isle of Wight Festival.
Things just came to a crisis point. Unfortunately, it was a shame because it was a great band and it shouldn't have been allowed to happen.
Rolled out from there, band had split. Rory had nothing to live on. He was skint completely, and Rory was taking an awful lot of press blame for the split of the band, which was very unfair.
There were huge issues to do with management and contractual obligations and so on. Rory had a period where he couldn't work, and then he had to sort of rearrange all his circumstances.
The next thing, Rory went to see Peter Grant, Zeppelin's manager. Rory agreed to let Peter negotiate with Polydor on his behalf, and Peter got him an amazing deal, and Rory's hit the ground running. So he then recruited two guys from a band called Deep Joy in Belfast. So you had Wilger Campbell on drums and Jerry McAvoy, the bass player.
I got a phone call early in 1971 from Rory. I just spoke to Wilger Campbell there. He's going to come down and have a bit of a jam session with me. Do you fancy coming over? And I had to think about it. Did I hell? We just started playing. A bit of rock and roll, a bit of blues, you know, for about 3 hours. And I'm a fan, don't forget, and I'm standing here, and Rory's there, and I'm playing with the guy, you know. And it was like fantastic. It was like a dream come true. So after that little rehearsal, I went back to Belfast. So I thought, well, that's it, you know. There you go. And then another phone call. Jerry, do you fancy coming over and making an album? So there you go. So I made the album. The first Rory Gallagher album.
Like a cat that's playing with the ball of twine that you call my heart.
Rory went solo and he brought out, I think, his best album, which was called Rory Gallagher, I Fall Apart and all those kind of songs. Just fantastic. We were absolutely, like, major fans of Rory Gallagher.
I think the first album is Rory sort of dipping his toes in the water, you know, exploring all his musical tastes, folk, even pop, blues, you know, a bit of rock, a bit of this, you know, so it's very diverse.
Then, believe it or not, Rory wasn't satisfied just to release one album. So in the second half of the year, he came with another album, which was aptly named Deuce.
I'm not awake yet. I haven't opened my eyes.
I think this is Johnny Marr's favourite album. and it had an influence, believe it or not, on the Smiths.
There's no bullshit to it. It was really stripped down. Juice still sounds very stripped down to me now, you know. He used to a load of production, so his voice sounded dead dry. And it sounded like he'd done it all in one take, which I think was his intention, probably.
It'd be one take, and there's a mistake on it. But if it sounded good, if the vibe was good, he would just pick that one, forget about the mistake. You know, he wanted that performance thing, you know.
See, that's an interesting thing about Rory, isn't it? There's not a vast difference between him in the studio and him live. So it's a very pure thing. You always hear Rory the way he just wants to be. It's just him and his guitar, really.
Live in Europe. Now, this is a great album because Rory's reputation was live. The band was becoming a well-oiled machine with Jerry on bass and Wilger, so Rory went for it. And of course, one of the tracks Rory became legendary for was Messing with the Kid, which was a Junior Wells blues composition, but Rory kind of took it and made it his own.
Live albums at the time, you were judged on. If you had a good live album, it meant you were great, because it meant that you could really play.
1972, he was voted #1 guitarist over all the usual suspects from Melody Maker, which was the biggest. That at the time was a global magazine. It was like the biggest thing. 1971, when Muddy Waters came over to record his London sessions, he'd already picked Rory, and he'd recorded with Jerry Lee Lewis, Lonnie Donegan. So he was up there with his masters, put it that way. So the student was getting there.
You just completed a super session album with Jerry Lee Lewis. How did that album come about?
Well, the producer, Steve Rowland, he just rang me up and said they were doing these sessions and invited me to come along. And I went down and I was on 5 tracks and they used 4. He didn't even practice or rehearse, just started off a boogie and you joined in if you knew it and they recorded it. It was 2 live albums that you had to have as a Rory fan real quick. You had to have Live in Europe, but the real holy grail as a fan was Irish Tour 74.
The Carlton Cinema was recorded, then on to the Ulster Hall, and then Cork City Hall. You could see the warmth between the artist and his audience. I mean, it was the proverbial homecoming type album for them.
He didn't walk out on stage and start looking down at his shoes.
came out and was like, I'm going to do a show, and all the people in the balcony at the back, they are going to be blown away. So it's a major combination of this young, cool-looking guy, stripped down, no bullshit, but he could really back it up.
The explosion of energy, the complete, absolute explosion of brilliance musically was what Rory, for me, epitomised. Once he was stepped near the stage, it was just absolutely a rush.
His playing was so ferocious at times and could move you through the heights of ecstasy, and it's wildly fantastic.
See, you always believed Rory. Rory was just on stage and he was always lost in what he was doing. He communicated through his music, he got lost in his music, and we got lost with him. It was as simple as that. Brilliant.
I mean, Rory was one of the hardest working gigging musicians in the history of rock and roll. He saw himself as a touring musician, as a kind of a modern day troubadour, taking his guitar from city to city to entertain people who loved the blues.
That's the thing about Rory. It really, the road was everything. Touring was everything, and I think it was his biggest drug.
To go to Japan in 1974 was so strange to us. I don't think any of us could get over how big Tokyo was. We had no concept. Japan seemed to be in another scale altogether.
When they arrived at the airport, there was about 100 of these young people, you know, with placards, Rory, welcome Rory, so on and so on, you know, which is really unusual. For the whole concert, the Japanese audience, they just sat and clapped very politely until the very last song, and then they all went crazy.
Rory had then decided to change tack and augment the band. He brought in Lou Martin because Lou was a fantastic piano player. And at that point, there was a new drummer, Rod Diath. It went more electronic with the keyboards, bringing up to a four-piece.
That first Japan tour was so successful because he gave everything to audience. From the first note of the opening track, he just, and that was amazing. And I felt that energy as well.
Rory had an interesting technique, and it's very early for this, of pushing on and pulling off strings. So you hear it in me, you hear it in Time of the Down. I'm hammering on and tapping off the same as he did.
A lot of guitarists start with that kind of minor pentatonic scale, and he had that absolutely mastered. He knew exactly how to take it and make it something incredible, like especially his licks, the way he put it around the vocals and stuff, the way he structured his songs. It's just his hands that are talking.
He wrote brilliant rock songs, and he's never given enough praise for that. He was a blues guy, you know, it was all based in the blues and all that, but he was a brilliant rock guitarist, and he was a brilliant rock writer.
His feel was so natural, and when he's playing slide on an acoustic, that's quite difficult. And if you just don't have it in you, you're never going to get something like that, really, because you have to be so good at it, you can be loose. That's how good he is. He's good enough to splash about.
Rory was so prolific in the first few years. From 71 to the end of 1974, he had delivered Polydor 6 albums, the entire contract, in the space of 4 years, because When the Rolling Stones came looking for Rory to replace Mick Taylor, they couldn't believe that Rory was out of contract.
The Stones were recording their next album, Black and Blue. They used it as a kind of an excuse to audition replacements. And Rory was asked, which just shows the esteem he was held in, you know.
So he travelled over to Rotterdam in early '75 and did a few nights with them, but walked away from it. So Rory's one of the great if, buts and maybes.
First time I met him, no one else had asked him for his pick, which amazed me, right? And I was, Rory, do you think you could? And as I was asking him, he just passed me his pick. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow. So I had a poster on the wall. So I got this pick and then I glued the pick to the poster. So he was on the guitar. And then I glued real buttons on his shirt, which I think was going a bit too far, really.
The thing about Rory, when you spoke to Rory, was like he was just a music man. That was his life. You know, he never married. He never kind of got involved with many people. You know, everything was around music.
He had a couple of girlfriends. Nothing very serious, which to me I think is a shame, you know, because I think it might have been a different story if Rory had somebody else in his life, you know. But he was very focused on his music.
I think he'd seen a lot of the bands split up because of the girlfriend, and that wasn't going to be a factor in his life. It was hard to understand, you know, that he was so solitary. I remember my mother was obviously hoping he'd meet a nice nurse, or I don't know.
He was naturally shy until that moment when he got up on stage.
As he put it in one of his songs, a little Dr. Jekyll, a little Mr. Hyde. That was Rory. There was the two parts.
I loved the yin and yang of him. It kind of makes sense to me because for many artists, in order to create, you have to be an introvert. And in order to perform, you have to be an extrovert. And I think that's what messes with the heads of most artists.
Welcome to the Ulster Hall. Well, Belfast, a particularly appropriate venue for tonight's act, because ever since the days of Taste, Rory Gallagher has regarded this as his second home, and the regard, as you can hear, is pretty mutual.
This became a shrine every Christmas to Rory. It was like Santa came on Christmas Day and Rory Gallagher came a few nights later. Despite all the troubles, he would always play here. And even at the height, 71, 72, the worst years, Rory was advised that he couldn't play here and basically took a stand that he wouldn't do a tour of Ireland without coming to play in the north of Ireland. Kids from both sides of the community wanted to come and see Rory, and thankfully there was never one incident. And it's fantastic to find that this is so well remembered.
It often seems to me that we've got very short memories, and you know, people don't seem to recall the fact that through the 1970s, north of the border, terrible atrocities were happening.
You've done me wrong for the last time.
A lot of British touring acts just made a very simple decision: we will not go there. And so even when the Troubles were at their most intense, he insisted on going ahead, playing the shows in Belfast.
Good to see you, Franklin. Hey, Barry. Good to see you.
Back to the Ulster Hall.
My goodness, it's been a while.
Remember coming out of here and I think it was 76, which is the height of like the murder gangs and stuff that were running about. There wasn't a street light on here. There were no taxis. And I had to get down the country 30 miles away. When I got home 7 o'clock in the morning, I was only 17. My dad beat me around every room in the house. He thought I'd been murdered. I told him a lie about getting up to the concert. You know, and in my tears I said to him, I'll do it tonight again.
Rory sort of inspired that dedication. Come hell or high water, we were going to get to that Rory concert.
I mean, really, it was a chink of light. Yeah. You know, we got that for 2 nights of the year when Rory was here.
That's it.
And then it just went back to, well, in our lives, it went back to madness outside. No other artist has played that hall more times than Rory Gallagher. You know, people say, oh, what's so good about him? It's just that undefinable factor. He could take you down onto the ground and then take you right to the sky. Yeah. Just had that natural ability.
He was at Polydor, the record company Polydor, and he felt himself that they really didn't push it enough, certainly in America. So he moved to Chrysalis, and then you have the series of albums at the mid to late 70s.
I thought Calling Card was a really great album. I think it's really good. I understand that the making of it was a little bit fraught to do with production, and so Rory sort of want everything to so authentic and like one take and not too much stuff.
Rory didn't like the producers, but he had struck up quite a friendship with Roger Glover from Deep Purple. As an album, I have to say the production works. By the end of it, Rory wasn't happy though, because he couldn't live with somebody else's production and mixes, and so he remixed the album. But to give Roger his full credit, he definitely put his stamp on this album.
There's a load of stories about Photo Finish. He had recorded it in San Francisco. Donald, his brother and manager, had all the record company guys in. They were all downstairs waiting in the hotel. He goes up to get Rory, and Rory has a finished copy of it that he's been listening to, and he literally throws it in the bin. And he says, no, that's not good enough.
He said, actually, I've been listening through. He said, this album isn't going out. And I said, Rory, at the 11th hour of the 11th minute of the 11th, whatever, this is ridiculous. I have to present something to the record company, you know. And he said, no.
Donald was the manager by this stage, so you can imagine him, he's pulling his hair out. You know, how do you go and meet these restless executives and explain, you know, Rory doesn't want it? But that was Rory.
I can't remember what yarn I spent. I mean, but on the way out of the hotel room, Rory, I said, I'm so angry I could break your legs or some stupid statement like that.
Rory stayed in San Francisco to do some mixing, and he went to see the Sex Pistols, and he was knocked out by the whole thing. It brought him back to what he was doing originally, with taste and that sort of adrenaline and that excitement that I think maybe he thought he'd lost. And that's when he dropped the band, you know. He retained me, thankfully.
From 77 into 78, and Rory split the band up. So he then started recording an album, and I said, Rory, there's a bit of a commitment here. Not only that, in Europe, because he had done Rock Palast, his stock had gone through the roof, as they say. He was the biggest thing in Europe, and he didn't have a band. So the Germans wanted to make a documentary on Rory, and they wanted to come to Ireland and film him in his own country. So I said, well, we'll be doing Macroom. Put the pressure on Rory to commit to a band and get a new band together. And so much so that Ted McKenna, the new drummer, had come in, and he literally was on the plane on the way over. He's had headphones on, practicing the set.
Would you welcome with his new drummer, Ted McKenna, Terry McElroy on bass, Rory Gallagher.
mean, you'll always have, you know, the hard pop scene, and then you'll have the alternative. And I prefer the alternative, so you don't have to sort of trim everything down to sort of 2 minutes, 30 seconds to sort of keep everyone happy, you know.
From the word go, Rory was opposed to singles. And I don't think he wanted to climb those heights. Rory had brought a single out and it went to #1. He's up there with them, you know, which I don't think he wanted that. And that's why he maintained this album thing. He wanted to make albums.
I'd like you to welcome to the stage, please, Rory Gallagher and the band.
Rory wouldn't do Top of the Pops. So he then fell into the kind of old grey whistle test type artist. So they would feature Rory. That's how he got his television. But Rory's attitude is play the songs live, let the people turn up and judge for themselves.
Why is it you think that radio doesn't play your songs? What's the problem with them and the radio and the whole business?
Well, the last couple of years, it's become a more cutthroat, and a lot of the A&R people and record companies are getting very, you know, pop record and video conscious and so on. It's not an ego trip, but I mean, you have to believe in yourself. Even if you're slightly wrong, it's better to do your own thing.
I mean, during the 80s was the trend of music changing yet again, you know, to more electronic music, which wasn't really Rory's bag. It wasn't any of our bags, you know. It was like, it was alien to us, you know. So Rory just shied away from the whole thing. A lot of space between albums then during the 80s, you know. There were a lot of, you know, we only brought like 3 albums out in the 80s. You know,
Defender from 1987 is a great record, and it opens with 3 songs. Continental Op is one of them, and they're these Pulp Fiction songs that he did throughout his career. You know, lyrically he was very strong. It's what he had over those other guitar players, over his contemporaries. Roy just doesn't get enough credit for that at all.
So Paul, into the 80s, then you take on the role as Rory's agent.
Yeah, no, I mean, at that stage, Rory was, very, very much in demand. Like, every festival that was going wanted to book Rory Gallagher.
Within the last 2.5 years, you haven't been in Ireland playing, so what have you been doing?
Well, we did 2 American tours, but they were college club tours. And then we also played behind the Iron Curtain, Yugoslavia and Hungary. We also did a lot of gigs in the continent. But you just don't hear about those things.
We were still touring, we were still gigging, but less and less. We weren't actually working as much, but we were still out there doing it, you know.
Into the 80s, Rory had long breaks, but he didn't function. Rory on his own in his house in London, he just did not know what to do with himself.
Oddly enough, I get more worn out by when I'm off the road from nervous tension. I'm better off when I'm touring. I wallow in it and I become fit, you know, whereas if I'm just doing, rehearsals or just doing little bits in the studio or something, I become really, less together than I am when I'm on tour.
I guess the simple thing is you just can't play every night. And he had no plan B. He had no, family time. To him, well, all I want to do is play the guitar.
Rory was sort of working day and night, the stress and all that, plus touring all the time. We were flying, particularly on the American tours, you might have 3 flights a day, connecting, and we'd all developed a fear of flying in particular, but Rory's got very acute. He had then started to take tablets to kind of keep him calm. I mean, the guy never used drugs. He didn't even smoke. I mean, he was just the straightest kind of guy you could think of. Then the prescribed medication became the problem.
Ultimately, the damage that's wrought by, prescription drugs on the one hand and fondness for a drink on the other hand, those were factors that very few people would have been aware of.
There was a depression there was a melancholy. And of course, when you're writing songs that are in the blues idiom, everything is negative, So he was kind of compounding his own mental situation.
Woke up this morning, I looked round for my shoes. You know I had walking blues. Woke up.
Fresh evidence. When he'd completed the album, he kind of wasn't well enough to promote it. In a way, you felt it was the farewell album.
When you listen to the words on Heaven's Gate, it's like quite frightening, it's quite scary. The lyrics, where Rory's head's at the time.
Feeling haunted, see the shadows on the shades. Stalking around the room, your name is on a blade. The darkness around your neck is like a metal claw. Who is gonna save you? Who will hear you call?
Whether it's a swan song, whether he knew that this is it, or I don't know. I find it difficult to listen to sometimes, that album, because of everything that went with it,
I mean, just the other day I found his 92 diary and I was looking through the lists of what the poor man was taking and how many prescriptions he had of it. Where did he get all this medication from? Some of it you would only get if you were in a psychiatric ward and under supervision.
It slowly got worse, and then it would get better. Then all of a sudden, he was fine,
The last time I met Rory was during the Guinness Temple Bar Blues Festival, and at which point Rory was saying, well, I haven't played in Dublin for a long time. I'm not sure how it's going to go. I hope, I hope it goes well. So he was in himself probably feeling the nerves. And then he moved from that space onto the stage like a complete, absolute thunderbolt. It was fantastic. People really responded.
He'd do a blues festival, he'd do that, and I'd always book in a club night the night before, a small club where if it was going to falter, let it falter then, because a few gigs had gone awry on him. I remember one night in the Town and Country, it was first four numbers were great, and then suddenly his hands turned to jelly, and then he didn't know what was happening to himself, and the side effects were all kicking in.
Rory wasn't in as much control of the shows as what he was in the past. To see that happening was heartbreaking. It really was heartbreaking.
Despite whatever effort you'd make, it would go back to square one, until eventually he deteriorated very quickly. And then I managed to hold a bed in the Cromwell Hospital, and I took Gracies inside, and then a couple of days later, come and meet the transplant team. And I go, for why? I thought diabetes or something like that. And then you're suddenly into this scenario, and they said that you have to make the decision because he's in a coma. They moved him to King's College, where they carried out the transplant.
I kept in touch with Donald just to see what was happening, and obviously when Rory was taken into the hospital, I mean, they were keeping me posted of what was going on.
he wasn't going to give up the fight, you know. He fought a brave, and then sadly, with all the looking after, he got a bug in the hospital, so he never came out of there.
I mean, to die as a result of MRSA in a hospital at the time, yeah, it was horribly unfortunate. But then there's nothing you can do about those accidents of fate that bring us to the exit door.
If you keep on walking, you walk right out of sight.
I just couldn't believe it. I mean, he was 47. He was a young man. You know, you're thinking, you know, what a waste. What a terrible waste.
I had that kind of helpless feeling like you do, just like wishing that I'd been able to spend time with him and kind of wishing I'd been able to tell him what I really thought of him. I think I did try to let him know what a massive influence he'd been on me.
I remember my parents being really sad about it because, you know, my bedroom was like a shrine, you know, but I sort of remember thinking at the time, weirdly, that a real blessing was that his manager was his brother.
You wanna hold,
Before we buried Rory, I slept in his bed, and it wasn't a dream. It wasn't made up. It was all I could say was like a trance. I went to the other side, kind of pleaded with him to come back, and he was going, "No, this is where I want to be. I'm happy. I've moved on." So I started to cry. Just couldn't hold it anymore. And then I remember Rory turned to me and said, "Now you've blown it. Now they'll know you're not from in here." And I woke up, get up and go to the graveyard. Rory died in 95, you know. To think that he's been discovered by more people now than probably even knew him when he was alive. His music lives on. I suppose for him, that's all he cared about. So he got that bit right.
I think it's a testament to Rory Gallagher that here in the streets of Ballyshannon, every year there are people here from 25 different countries across the world because they experience Rory live and they want a little piece of that 25 years on.
Even the great guitarists of the world say, well, the Rory is better than I am.
He was really authentic. He took his old jeans, his old stretch, then he begins to rock and roll. That's real.
Rory Gallagher, God bless you, man. You know.
To me, the guy played like it was his last every night. That's the core of where it all comes from. You know, you can have all the technical and this and that and gadgets and stuff like that, man, but it's as an element that has to come from the person.
If it hadn't been for Rory, I don't think you would have had your U2s and your undertones and your Thin Lizzies. Rory started it. He was the first proper rock star out of Ireland, you know.
But I mean, Rory's legacy shines in these people. I mean, like Ballyshannon, the festival every year, you know, it's great to see young people, you know, picking up a guitar like, and trying to emulate Rory, you know, as best they can.
He's always been someone that's very well known in like the sort of guitar geeks world. So I don't think he'll ever be forgotten. His music will always live on.
His legacy is absolutely extraordinary. He demonstrated as a guitar player just what the potential of this instrument was.
I'm still not retired. Every night of the week there's some event somewhere, or there's some publication, or there's some inquiry. Just put out a Rory Live in London album all round, man. There's always something new on Rory on the horizon.
The family wanted me to have his Silvertone guitar.
You play it?
I do play it, yeah. It's got a really super distinctive sound, yeah. Sort of think of myself as being like the caretaker of it.
Like, I remember 6 years into 2FM, or Radio 2 as it was called, and I was interviewed by one of these magazines saying, you know, it's the dream job. What's the best thing about it? Best thing about it is, for the last 5 years, I've got a Christmas card from Rory Gallagher. I mean, that's just the greatest thing ever. And like, come on, isn't it? Brilliant.
Anyone who's been influenced by me is influenced by Rory Gallagher. It's this wonderful river in which I'm privileged to be a part. He'll always be with me in what I do.
One of the most alluring things as a young fan that I picked up off him was all you need in this world is your guitar and maybe an amplifier. And everything's all right.